Let's switch gears now. According to the calendar of the National Bureau of Statistics, the gross domestic product report for the third quarter of this year will be released next month. Now, if this report shows negative growth, it may be a confirmation of a recession. Tonight, Babajide Ogusanwo, data and information consultant, will share insights of the possible outcome and reaction to the third quarter GDP report. He joins me now on the news at 10. Always great to see you.
Good evening, Amarachi.
Good evening. And you don't come with any good news, I suppose. So if I'm correct, then, the economic growth report of the second quarter of this year was negative of 6%. Then what sort of number should we be expecting this time?
We'll talk about numbers. We'll talk about good news. And certainly, we can't talk about good news without talking about bad news. But tonight, I have this for you because there's one key that can unlock the door of frustration in Nigeria.
Correct.
There's one key that can open the door to economic growth. There's one key, Amarachi, one key that can unlock the potential of Nigeria's 60 million youths. And tonight, I'd like to put this key and leave this key with you. Now, what is this key? I'll tell you what this key is. But before then, I'd like to talk about the good news and the bad news. So which should we start with, the good or the bad?
Well, give us the bad news before the good news, so we end the night on a more cheery note.
Now, the bad news, which is what you want to start with first, is that the president has presented the budget, but the budget is not the key. Let's take a look at the chart of the week, because the chart of the week will let us know what this key really is. And if we focus on that, here's what you'll notice. It shows that today's Nigeria's economy, yesterday's Nigeria's economy, really hasn't been growing because of the government. It has been growing because of families, private household expenditure, as the economists would like to call it. In other words, family spending, families account for 74% of what we call as today's Nigeria. The spending and all of this budget by the government accounts for only 6% of the size of the economy. You heard me right. Government spending accounts for only 6%. And so, yes, we've seen a 13 trillion naira budget, but even if this budget was 20 trillion naira, it still means that Nigeria's economy will not grow by double digits. In other words, the key to Nigeria's present and the future that I'm placing in your hands is really on the private families, you and I. If we can get more families to spend more, then that is how this economy and this country can really be great. That is the bad news. It is really not about how much the government spends. So we need to make sure that we're not just trying to get the rich to be poorer. We're trying to get the poor to be richer. And once we can do that, that really is the key that I'm placing in your hands.
So how could this key help in reaching double-digit economic growth?
And so it really is by we making sure that we move things much faster. Over the years, and which is what we'll eventually look at when we look at the specific outlook of the third quarter GDP report, the evidence shows that we've been moving extremely slow. And so millions of Nigerians tonight are looking at their time, and it shows, and if you look at yours, it shows 10:40 p.m. Or if the president were to remove his wristwatch, his time really shows 5 p.m. Now, what do I mean by 5 p.m.? The president's 8-year term is right now on 69% of his term. So it is, if this were a clock, for the president, it is 5 p.m. The president is no longer in morning, is right now in the evening, and we can see that soon it will be nighttime. So things really need to move significantly faster for the economy, and really things need to move for private families, because that is really, again, where Nigeria's key is.
So how will they move faster, considering the nation's insecurity challenge, and now with insecurity generally from what has happened, the fallout of what has happened last week?
So the evidence we have shows that the economy has been the driver of national security. So if the economy isn't performing well, then it will affect security. Here's the fact, and this is why we need to pay more attention to data. When the National Bureau of Statistics released the Q2 GDP report, it showed minus 6% growth rate. That was the slowest growth rate we had seen in this administration. And what often has happened is, yes, we've seen what has happened with not just security in the north and south, but a lot of these events are also really connected to the state of the economy. If you look at what has happened in previous Q3, the previous quarter 3 reports that have been released by the National Bureau of Statistics, here's what you find. And I would like us to take a close look as we expect this new GDP report. If we take a look at that, the previous reports that have been released by the National Bureau of Statistics, here's what you find. None of these reports have we seen double-digit growth rates, if you take a close look at that. None of these reports have we seen a GDP growth rate that is above that would guarantee a higher standard of living. What we've seen is that the Nigerian economy really needs to put on weight. Quarter 3 of 2015, growth rate of only 2.8%. That went into negative in quarter 3 of 2016. Quarter 3 of 2018, 1.8%. And the last quarter 3 report of last year was only 2.3%. Clearly, with what is in front of you, none of our quarter 3 reports has even hit 3%. What does this mean? It means that it will be nearly impossible for us to see a positive growth rate in the new report that will be coming up. That is nearly impossible, not impossible. But what most analysts and economists are saying is there will most likely be a minus 4% growth rate, plus or minus a margin of error of 1%. So it's either we're looking at a minus 3, a minus 4, or perhaps a minus 5% growth rate.
Wow.
But in the final analysis, let's not forget what a wise man said. The lack of money is the root of all evil, but also the love of money is the root of all evil, Amarachi.
Thanks again, Professor Jide.
Please remember to keep your key.
Well,
because really the growth...
You didn't push it all the way, though, but...
That's
okay.
it for you.
Right.
5 p.m., the president's time, 5 p.m.
Right. Thanks again. Thanks again.